Thank you, Superintendent Stiles, for your dedication to Black male teachers in your district. As someone who spent significant time in the classroom during my career, fully understand how impactful it is to have someone like you at the helm of a school system, not just for the Black men in the school, but for all students, staff, families that you support. My name is Devin Morris. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Teachers Lounge. We do work to recruit, revitalize, and retain educators of color throughout the greater Boston area and beyond. And I have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. John Travis, former teacher and principal in Boston Public Schools. Dr. Travis now works for the Barr Foundation, where he provides philanthropic support to education nonprofits such as He Is Me Institute and the Teachers Lounge, to name just a few, who are working towards large-scale equity. And so for the next 20 minutes, Dr. Travis will share more about his experiences in his various roles throughout the education system. Living out Dr. King's vision, John's career shows that in order to truly reach our mission, we need collaboration from multiple entities who are rowing in the same direction of equity. But before we start, Dr. Travis, would love it if you could let us know a little bit more about the Barr Foundation and your role.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, honestly, an honor to kind of be connected with so many people like yourself, Brewster, that we heard from earlier, folks that are in the work, supporting young people as men of color in this work. So I just feel honored to be here. I started the Barr Foundation a couple of months ago, but the Barr Foundation is a local philanthropic organization here in Boston that's committed to investing here regionally across New England, across three main areas. We do work in arts and creativity, in climate and the environment, as well as education. And I'm part of the education team. And the foundation sees itself as both a steward of resources, as well as a catalyst to innovation that is focused on the thriving of people, creativity, and the natural world that we're a part of. So it's a really great organization. I've been excited to be a part of it. And honestly, one of the reasons that I wound up there is it's like stated and lived commitment and focus on centering racial equity, which I think is core to the mission, and has only become more a part of what Barr does in its public facing work over the last few years. So I'm just really excited to be a part of that work and that organization.
Excellent. And we are absolutely thrilled to have you here today as well. So how do you see yourself and the Barr Foundation living out the legacy of Dr. King inside of classrooms?
Yeah, and that's a big question, right?
Yeah.
So I can, the first thing I just talk about is just myself personally. So I'm a product of Philadelphia. So I grew up in Philadelphia, product of Philadelphia Public Schools. I grew up in West Philadelphia. Born and raised, yes. In a small, like an African-American community in West Philadelphia. And, it's home. And it's funny, as I was taking the training here today, there's lots of different versions of my story I tell people. For whatever reason, today's MLK Day. And I honestly, I thought I'm biracial. My dad is white, my mom's African-American, but my maternal grandfather is a product of North Carolina. So he was born in a sharecropping family in relatively rural North Carolina. He moved to Philadelphia, the city where I grew up, as a part of the Great Migration in the 50s and 60s, as folks moved north looking for economic mobility and opportunity. And I've been thinking about all the ways that we stand on the shoulders of the people who've come before. And I think about the world that my grandfather was born into and raised in, and the opportunities he had, and the opportunities my mother had, and the opportunities that I've had. And all of that has been impacted by the work of Dr. King.
Sure.
So I'm a little nervous to associate anything I've actually done with his work, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I hope that it's been inspired by that. But yeah, so again, you definitely have that sense of wonder and just feeling like you want to live out a legacy of other people's work. But I became an educator in part because I got to see, growing up in the neighborhood I did, I was a product of opportunity. I got to receive educational opportunities that were not afforded to every kid in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
I didn't go to my neighborhood local school. That opened up doors to me, and it's just not okay for us to live in a world where economic mobility and educational opportunity is like reserved for some. Like we have to do it for all kids.
Sure.
So yeah, I became an educator, became a teacher, at least in small part because of wanting to be a part of the joining that struggle for equity and freedom for all kids, all people. It's interesting. I think about the like small impacts that it has. I'm sure we'll talk about it at other times, but even early on in my career, I was amazed by just my identity and my positionality in the world, the experiences I've had, and the sort of how I show up in the work and what that means to the young people I've had a chance to work. I'm sure, yeah, as I'm sure you know. As we think about the work though with the foundation, at Barr, I get to. I had this tremendous opportunity to like lead work that is in support work that is focused on seeing more Devin Morrises in the world, right?
Yep.
And that's what you're about. That's what your work is about. You want to see people of color thriving in the field. And I'm sitting in a different seat now than the one I was when I was a classroom teacher and a principal. I'm really just trying to support folks like you and support organizations like He Is Me to see the vision so that, you know, every kid gets these kinds of opportunities,
right.
Opportunities to work with a Black male educator. Barr funds a teacher's lounge you mentioned, He Is Me. But I got to inherit that work because of the vision of the foundation and the people who came before me. We're right now engaged with partnership with TNTP. We've been partnering with local districts here in New England to build the infrastructure to diversify their educator workforce at scale across multiple districts. And it's an honor for me to kind of feel like I can come close to supporting and enabling that work from the perspective of the foundation. So
and that coalition building and collaboration is so absolutely essential. And you have, I would say, honored that you say 2 months, which I'm sure has felt like a whirlwind from day one. I think you have shown that has been a priority for you.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about your experience as a student.
Yeah.
Talk to us about your experience in the classroom and what other supports did you need as a classroom teacher?
Yeah, so when I think about this work in classrooms, and I think Mr. Brewster spoke to it earlier about that having that belief in the potential of young people. Yeah. So much of that to me is like predicated on people having belief in us, you know, like the men of color who are entering the work, because the work of education, it's hard. Yeah. Like it's just not easy. Like I think sometimes we can kind of like say, oh, you know, anybody can do this. And I'm sure, yes, lots of people can do this work. They can step into it, but it's a craft, you know, like it's art and science. Like, and it takes time to like hone that. And so you're gonna take licks. And I think for people of color, like who step into these spaces, who are your champions? You know, who are the people who see something in you and remind you of who they know you are, and more than that, who they know you can be. Right. And I stand on the shoulders of giants. For me, it was Denise Dunham. She was the principal of the high school where I worked for a number of years, who saw things in me, who believed in me. She hired me. She would have conversations with me like, okay, so when you're a principal, when you're leading your school, like she did that kind of investment in me. Yeah. She's the reason I went to graduate school. I'm not a school leader. I'm not in this seat if it's not for her. And I'm curious, honestly, for you though. I mean, you've been in this work for a while. Like what were some of the things that you felt like you needed in the work to thrive?
First of all, shout out Denise Dunham. Make sure we give love and props where it's due. And so what I would say is similar to the ways in which our students of color in particular don't see enough of us in the profession. And those that they do see, if we are overworked, underappreciated, undervalued, why would they ever view this as a viable profession? But what was also true for myself as an early career educator of color is that I didn't have veteran educators of color to look up to for guidance and support. I didn't have OGs in the game who could provide the work or the support that I needed at that time to know what was possible, to know what pathways there were and support along that journey. And I truly believe it's why organizations like He Is Me and the Teachers Lounge, for example, are necessary. But that collaboration and community cultivation for educators of color, and particularly Black male educators outside of the classroom, is just as important as within the classroom. Until our schools start to mirror our student populations better, then we have to kind of step outside of our school buildings in order to build that community of mentorship. And shameless plug, but Rob and the folks at He Is Me have been really influential, and folks like Ed Brewster in supporting. We have a Classroom Leaders of Color Fellowship, where we pair early career educators of color with veteran educators of color from across the district and outside of the district. Again, until our school buildings mirror what we need within to be able to have those veteran educators of color, then we have to find them, because again, I didn't have them. I imagine you didn't have them.
I in my entirety of my teaching career, I think I have worked in a school with one other Black male educator.
Yeah.
And like for the like it's and that's not to say that, you know, that folks aren't out there and that people aren't in the work, but just not at the levels of scale. What is it, 2%? You know,
that's right.
There's so few of us. But the thing I reflect on is like what does it mean for us to be in the work?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you could tell 100 stories about what does it mean to be in the work. But there was one student in particular that always comes to mind anytime I think about this. And I don't know that it was anything about me, even as an educator, but sometimes people see things in you or connect to you for like no reason other than the fact that you walk around in skin that's like theirs and you've probably had experiences. So they give you favor, perhaps that you did. I mean, I was an early career teacher. I'm not sure I deserve the favor this young man gave to me, but I watched a student who walked through my classroom door, my math classroom doors as a freshman in high school, who was never been seen as an honor student or a strong math learner. I watched him work incredibly hard. And by the time this young man was a senior in high school, he was in BC calculus, and he graduated high school with college credits. And he wrote a note in the yearbook the last year I was there at the school, where he told me that he had planned to drop out because it was all he knew. Like everybody else, like his older cousins who had gone through school, they'd all dropped out. They hadn't finished high school. He figured that would be his path. Yeah. And like the fact that he saw something in me as his educator that like made even a small difference in that. But again, I know it's not me though. Again, I'm standing on the shoulders of I was in a school with that school leader who had a vision, and I worked with other educators who also believed in him when I passed them off the next year, and he was in honors classes, you know, who believed in him. So it's never about one person. Like we make this about Mr. Morris or Mr. Travis, like we're never going to get there. It has to be that kind of collaboration. But I'm curious for you, like what were some of those, like what are some of those things for you?
Yeah, so I think we were thinking with regard to sort of what we didn't have, right? And so it was very important to me stepping into the profession. And then so now I'm in year 13 in education, thinking back to what I didn't have and how do we pay it forward and ensure that the next generation does. And so thinking about how we've been advocates for Black male teachers in all of my roles in education. And I think something as simple as when I was a school leader, or backtrack, when I was a classroom teacher, it was about forging community with other Black male teachers, again, within our building, but then also outside of our building. And I gave praise to Dr. Travis Bristol for actually being the sort of inspiration for crafting the Teachers Lounge, because he was convening Black male educators long before it was a cool thing to do or the thing that needed to happen in education, that as many think. Then as I progressed to leadership roles, I made something as simple as being the first face that a candidate of color, particularly Black male candidates, saw when they walked into a building, right? And so those are, I think, the little things. But then coaching and mentorship across my time in education for the younger generation of Black male teachers, because I recognize one, we don't have us in the profession, and two, how absolutely important it is that we remain in a profession that we have every reason to run kicking and screaming from. And so how do we change the systems and supports that then would keep us in the profession is the question.
Yeah, I think it's an important one. It's one that I know that I'm thankful to be in the role that I'm in, because our foundation is like committed to seeing like people of color thrive in roles in education in service of excellence for kids. Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's about having impact in a positive way in the lives of young people to ensure that they have excellent outcomes. Yeah. In particular for the students that have been traditionally marginalized. So many students of color have been traditionally marginalized in America's like educational system.
Yeah. I think the only other thing I would just add is that as a nonprofit that serves all educators of color across the Commonwealth, we are not naive to the fact that there are very specific needs that Black male educators have. And so we are not in the business of saying that we will provide all services to all educators of color, including Black male educators, and we don't need any support. But this is where the community and collaboration comes into play, because the work that he is doing serves the very specific needs of Black male teachers that we couldn't do on our own. And that I don't think happens enough in the profession to be able to say that we can work together to provide those supports. So I'm gonna move us along. Why would you say is the lack of Black male teachers in a child's life detrimental? And what are some examples of evidence of your impact?
Yeah, so we need to have Black male teachers because we have Black male students. Yeah. Students need to be able to see themselves in the work. Our schools need to reflect the communities that they're a part of. Sure. I think that there's a real cost that comes when schools don't reflect that. But we need Black female teachers. We need white male teachers. We need teachers that represent the like rich diversity of our entire nation. And honestly, like when I think back on like the legacy of Dr. King, I think that's the thing he was pointing us towards. Mm-hmm. Like if we look at the world and we see things, we see that only 2% of our educators are Black male teachers. And we know that that is not what they represent in our broader community. It means that something is not working. Mm-hmm. Something is not right, because there's no reason that we should have that kind of disproportionality anywhere. And I think it matters for a whole range of reasons. It matters for like what students see and how they connect to school, feeling themselves there. I think it has an impact on what people believe, but it also has an impact on narrative and story. Sure. Like how do schools see themselves? Like what are they trying to do? What are they about? And if the voices of Black male teachers are not in the room as teachers are planning what lessons look like, or as school leaders are planning what professional learning looks like in their community, as district leaders are planning the strategic initiatives, like if they're not Black men at those tables having that kind of impact, if our voice isn't there, because we have experiences that are unique, they're unique to our experience. It doesn't make them any better or worse than anybody else's, but they're unique. And we also know that our school systems have not at scale figured out how to serve young Black men as students. So knowing that, we'd be remiss not to think about it. And again, I shared that one story, but there's other kids. I mean, there's another female student who I had this is when I was a math teacher, but she had come from another district. And because that district didn't have the same sort of equity forward focus in the kind of work that they did, she was denied an opportunity to take an advanced class in high school because her guidance counselor didn't believe that she could thrive in that class. Yep. Then she comes to our school, and because of a choice somebody made somewhere else, she was like a year behind her classmates when she came to our district, because we had those sort of like forward thinking, like equity centered processes and structures. And so like, I can't help but wonder, like, and this is why teachers, yes, but also, guidance counselors and social workers and clinicians and special educators and, like a whole range, like we need people at all phases of the work. But I can't help but wonder if she'd been working with a a school counselor who was a Black man who saw potential in this young woman, and her and her mom said she wanted to take an advanced class, like, would that have been a different conversation? Would they have said, yes, you can take that advanced class?
Yeah.
Like it comes down to, it's system stuff, but it also comes down to those small, minute, like quiet moments, where decisions get made that set people on trajectories.
We are running short on time. Otherwise, I would go down the rabbit hole of guidance counselor stories and limiting potential and all the what ifs. So I'm going to ask our final question. So as working towards education equity requires input, collaboration, and collective strategy from districts, colleges, philanthropists, and advocates. Given your range of experience across sort of several of those entities, what's one shared message that you want all of these stakeholders to walk away with today?
Well, I'll say this. I don't believe that the answer exists in some back room at a foundation. So I don't believe that. I think the answer is out in the field and the people doing the work. So if there's anything, like I want to know what you think about this, Devin, more than anything, because you were in the work, you're the one that's doing the work. I sit in a seat where I'm just trying to support and invest, but like what do you think is the most important thing?
Yeah. So I think there are two quotes that stand out to me. One, anybody else coming to save us.
Yeah.
So there's no reason that we can't be the ones to do the work. And then there's a Teddy Roosevelt quote that says, do what you can with what you have, where you are. And I think it's the right sentiment, but I would alter it just a bit. Do what you can with what you have access to, where you are. And I think too often we think money is the only resource. Money's good. Please continue to pour into He Is Me in the Teacher's Lounge. But time, energy, knowledge, and probably most important to me is networks and community are all resources that we can use to support those who are already doing incredible work. Or to incite the next impactful idea. Because to your point, it's not sitting in it. I don't actually believe that it's sitting in any given one entity. I actually think it's coming with that collaboration across stakeholders to bring student voice in, to bring family voice in, to bring classroom educator voice in, which I think is often left out, and particularly when we talk about marginalized educators, so educators of color, and particularly Black male teachers. We know we can't do the work alone, and we can't wait for others to come along and save our babies or our future. Yeah.
And I think I would say too, to anybody that's out there listening, like we invite partnership, like the Barr Foundation's been excited to support organizations like He Is Me and like the Teacher's Lounge. I know this entire event today is sponsored by State Street. We want to invite other partners into the work. Like if you see this work as being important and being important for the impacts of the lives of young people, like we invite you to partner with us. Because again, I don't think that our foundation or any of these individual organizations necessarily have the whole thing. But that doesn't mean together in coalition and collaboration, we can't get there. And that's, again, isn't that the legacy of Dr. King when it comes down to it? It wasn't about one man trying to do work. It was collaboration and coalition across multiple places. So.
That's right. So we actually have a question from Facebook.
Ooh, there you go.
Oh, look at this, interactive. Shout out to Ron. Is there a bond between Black men that can be bottled and brought into schools? Why is the culture needed?
Yes, I think there is. I think that there is like a set of common shared experiences. There's a shorthand. There's a knowing look. I mean, when did we meet, Devin? Was that a couple months ago?
Yeah.
And we've had a handful of conversations over that time, but there's a certain shorthand for like the kind of experiences, and I don't know. Yeah. But there's a certain shorthand for the kind of experience about what it means to walk through this world as a Black man. It's different than a whole lot of other kinds of experiences, and I think that like kind of collective bond, when like people talk about like wanting to bottle it up, like I actually think it's less about bottling it up, and it's more about like rolling up your sleeves, right? It's about leaning in and finding whatever way that you can in whatever role or seat you're sitting in. If you're a parent, right? Like your engagement, your support of your school community. If you're somebody who can give, then giving your resources. If you're somebody who has time, then like asking the question. And if even if you feel outside of it, even if you feel like far away from the work, it's like asking, okay, what can I do in my role in order to support the thriving of a group of people? I think every individual person kind of has to ask themselves the question, like, what can I do?
Sure.
How can I stand up? How can I be a leader in some small way? Again, it'll really vary, but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that folks can do. What do you think?
I'm struggling with this, and it's a great question. Whoever asked this on Facebook, you can't bottle up Blackness. And so what I think in an agreement in terms of what you brought to the surface is what we often talk about in terms of the value that educators of color, and particularly Black male teachers, bring to the classroom, which is vast. There are certain aspects that cannot be bottled up. It is our identities, lived experiences. But what we often talk about are things that should be common to all teachers.
Yeah.
A belief that students, particularly students of color, can succeed.
Yes.
And are deserving of the same quality of education as their white counterparts. That doesn't require Blackness at the center of it in order to ring true. And so there are aspects of what it means to engage the whole child, the entire family, and value and honor their experiences that falls outside of that every single educator should bring to the table. And we need to do a better job of training teachers to have those skill sets and mindsets. And there are aspects to, again, our lived experiences as Black male students who then became Black male teachers that can't be bottled up.
Yeah. And I really appreciate what you said, because I think it's important to always hold on to the fact that this isn't just the work of Black male teachers.
Sure.
And sometimes, unfortunately, we frame it as if the problem is we just don't have enough Black male teachers. And if we did, like the whole problem would like go away. The problem, it's not just that, it has to be all of us.
Yeah.
All of us have to share a vision of all children thriving at the highest levels. We just have to. And to me, again, that's the legacy. When you talk about the legacy of Dr. King, I think the legacy of Dr. King in this work is it has to be an all of us effort.
Sure.
And if only 2% of our educators are Black male teachers, then there's still work to be done.
That's right. And I think, the biggest piece that I hang on to with regard to the work that He Is Me is doing is about the retirement component of this work and of their mission. And that can't happen. We can recruit until we're blue in the face, more and more Black male teachers, but if we're not doing the necessary work to ensure that we remain in the profession and retire from the profession, then it's all for naught.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Travis.
Thank you.
Time and insight on this important day. I also want to take a moment to invite you all to join us in continuing the legacy of Dr. King. With your donation, He Is Me Institute will be able to build pathways for Black men to become and remain teachers in your community, just as they've done in both Boston and Middletown. So what you can do is make a donation today, but also, and I think just as important, is spread the word to your network about He Is Me Institute and their opportunity to also contribute. And now we'll hear from Robert Hendricks, He Is Me founder and CEO.